So she drove home drunk with the friend. So she starts throwing punches. I grabbed her arms to restrain her so I didn't get punched in the face anymore. So the friend starts punching me in the face. I let go of Justine, who goes around the corner into the kitchen, grabs a metal broom and starts swinging it at me like a baseball bat.
Hey, my name is Gavin McMillan, and I'm here today with Scott McKay. We're going to do, I guess, a first podcast, and there will be many more after this, interviewing men and women who have kind of come through abusive relationships and trying to find out, if there were red flags or if there were, traumas that occurred in previous generations, either their parents' generation or even grandparents' generation, which would have indicated that maybe something like this could happen. It's not always going to be the case, but we're going to see if we can dig into it. Each one of these things should be about 30 minutes long. So Scott, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to get started. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Cool. So we're going to kind of start by taking a step back in time to when you were a kid. When you were growing up, did you have a good relationship with both your maternal and your paternal grandparents?
Yeah, a good relationship, but a fairly limited one, I guess you could say. My dad's dad died when I was about 8 years old, so I have nothing but good memories, but very few of them. His mother lived until a few years ago, and you would never notice it as a kid. Like, thinking back, she never remarried or never recoupled or anything. So, but that's not something you think about as a little kid. It's just grandma's house and you get candy and cookies, and there was no sign of problems there. On my mother's side, I would say I had a better relationship just because they were alive longer into my life.
Mm-hmm.
But me and my grandfather on my mom's side were quite close, and my grandmother, her mother, ended up with dementia and had to be hospitalized and everything. So I would say my relationship with her was a little less just because of her cognitive ability at that point.
Fair enough. Were either of your grandparents involved in the war, either directly or peripherally? I guess Second World War is what I'm referring to.
No, they were born early. The only thing I've ever seen, my grandfather on my mom's side actually had a letter from the government saying that he was exempt from service because of a agriculture farming sort of exemption.
Oh, like he was producing crops or something like that, and
yeah, and didn't have to go. And then, but they had siblings that were a little bit older and involved. My grandparents were just kind of, I think, on the bubble of when it started. They weren't old enough to go, and by the time they were old enough to go, it was nearing the end, and it wasn't quite the demand for bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I wonder, even growing up, like in your teenage years and having the war happening, like I wonder what kind of impact that had.
Yeah. I'm sure it was huge, and not like today where there's 1,000 outlets and you can see everything that's going on. It was really, I'm sure, terrifying because you don't know, am I going to be drafted tomorrow or not?
Yeah, well, there's the draft component of it, which is, I guess, somewhat reflected in the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's going on right now. But I wonder if we just get so much more exposure to it now because there is television and there is constant like CNN is, and many others are now 24-hour news organizations that do nothing but report on whatever war is right now. Interesting. What about your ex? Do you have any knowledge or recollection of their relationship or her relationship with her grandparents? Or
I guess limited knowledge. Her maternal grandmother died while we were together. She was in her 80s, had cancer. It was not unexpected, but she had never known her grandfather on that side. I guess they separated very early, and he was not a part of the lives of her mother and uncles. So there was really only the one living grandparent that she had a relationship with. She did have her grandfather on her dad's side is, to the best of my knowledge, still alive, or was at the time of our separation, but was in Ontario, not Alberta, where Justine was born and raised. So there was a very limited relationship there.
fair enough. What about her parents? Did she have a good relationship with her parents?
No one in that family has a good relationship with anyone else in that family.
Okay. Was there anything specific?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to
Go into any
unpack
more
there.
detail
And
than you're comfortable with. I'm not trying to pry by any means.
no, not that I'm uncomfortable. It's just trying to keep this kind of on track without talking for the next 2 hours. But yeah, there was a lot of problems. Her dad, and this is all, I wasn't there when she was a kid. This is all just what she's told me.
Mhm.
But there was a lot of problems in their home with her dad being violent towards her brother, who ended up being a huge drug problem and recently overdosed, no longer alive. There's her and her sister, who I don't think were party to the violence, but were constantly witnessing it. It was just always there. They were, I think Justine was about 14 when her dad started having an affair and kind of split their family up. And then there was a lot of issues with the separation and how the kids were to handle it. And I don't think they ever really handled it properly. And it was a fairly messy separation, which all happened before I met her, but she doesn't speak very well of her childhood.
How old would she have been when her parents split up?
I want to say when it was, the affair was first discovered, she was about 14. So maybe 15, 16 by the time the actual divorce was finalized.
And the mother had the affair, or the father had the affair?
Father.
Interesting. What about your folks? Are you like, how was your childhood? With your mom and dad?
Yeah, still have a great relationship. I have two brothers, mom and dad, small town. I honestly don't know that I've ever seen them fight. I'm sure they have, but we weren't exposed to it. It was a pretty simple, boring, small town upbringing. There's no big story to tell. It was pretty average, mundane, small town life.
Fair enough. So when you guys kind of first got together, can you kind of describe the beginning of the relationship? Like, was it like hot and heavy really fast? I'm not asking obviously for any kind of descriptions, but like, did you kind of experience that kind of love bombing, or like?
Yeah, no, it was all very quick. I was, well, I guess how we met is she worked in a little like corner pub in the neighborhood that I lived in. So me and a couple of people that I worked with would go there on a fairly regular basis after work. And I was going through kind of a bad breakup, you could call it, just kind of strange circumstances at the time. And we kind of connected, and it wasn't very long until we started dating, and then it became pretty hot and heavy and fast moving. And less than a year after we started dating, we moved in with each other. Less than a year after that, we were married. Year after that, the girls were born. Like, it was just bang, bang, bang.
Was she coming out of a relationship at the same time? Was it
Um, the she was in a relationship, not a serious one. The previous relationship with her older two kids' dad had been over for a couple of years, and then it was kind of just, my understanding at least, casual dating. So it wasn't a serious relationship she was leaving at that time. It was just kind of, she was single and I was single at the same time, and it lined up. And she made a lot of effort to for us to be a couple.
I don't know how to read into that, but that's I think it's, I guess, somewhat typical to get that kind of like love bombing where, you know, you get through that honeymoon phase or you're in the honeymoon phase of your relationship, and it's just like you bend over backwards for each other to try and establish that relationship.
Yeah, well, and I think I don't know how much to expand on it, but it was for me a bit of a, I guess you could call it the white knight, because it was a lot of derogatory talk about her older kid's dad, and she was in such a bad spot financially, and the house she lived in was a bad place to be. Like, I can't believe that house wasn't condemned, but she was there. So I thought, hey, I can get her out of this and be the hero. And so, and I think that was kind of her plan all along, is she never, I think she only married me with the intention of getting divorced, because that was her way out of her situation. And my job wasn't to be a husband or father, it was to pay the bills when she needed bills paid.
When you look back on it, can you see like is there evidence of that kind of manipulative strategy?
Absolutely, yeah. We looking back, it actually seems fairly obvious, especially in light of she's kind of doing the same thing to someone else now. But yeah, it was a lot of poor me kind of sob story that I bought, and she would just feed into that and like kind of turn me against her ex, who I had never met, who, where I was going, I can't believe anyone would treat her this way. And then a few years down the road, I'm hearing all the same stories, but now my name's attached. And yeah, looking back, there were a lot of red flags. And then it was almost immediate, an almost immediate change in personality after we actually got married. Like, once we were married, it became threats and ultimatums. Like, I will divorce you and I'll take everything if you don't do it my way.
Really?
Like,
Do you think the marriage was like a critical kind of hook so that she could kind of, not, I guess not extort you, but maybe yes, extort you?
more or less, I think the only reason that we got married was because she had a plan to get divorced and benefit from it financially.
Well, like, I guess were there red flags? Were there signs that you look back on and go like, why didn't I see this? Now that you're like, you've got not the benefit of experience, but like you've been through this, you know, the ringer in family court and also in criminal court. Were there signs that you look back on now and go like, fuck, why didn't I see that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think more on the violent side, like where I would go to her house before and it would be filthy and torn apart and holes kicked in all the walls and doors slammed off hinges, and she would go, oh, look what the other guy, Chris is his name, I guess we could, doesn't matter if we say that or not here, but look what Chris did. He'd come in and kicked holes in all my walls and trash this place. And I bought hook, line, and sinker and went, oh, what an asshole who would do that. And then I moved her into my house, and she proceeded to smash holes in walls and trash the place and slam doors off hinges. And then I look back and go, well, why did I believe that it was ever him? He didn't live there. She did.
Mhm.
And that's the problems that she complained about in that place were exactly how she treated my house when she was here.
So why, I guess, why didn't you leave the relationship sooner? Like, did you feel some kind of like, I know you lived together first and then you got married
Mhm.
and continued to cohab. And then like, did you feel like some like duty to support your family? Did you feel a duty, you just thought you could handle it, figured it was what guys do, or
I would say it's a combination of things. It was, I guess, first and foremost, when she would get violent and have her issue. Honestly, it was like living with two different people where when everything was going how she wanted it to go, she was a lot of fun to be around. She was the girl that I fell in love with. She was what I hope my wife would be. But then if something didn't go her way, whether it be between us or her other court situation or work or just any stress in her life, I became the punching bag. And if I didn't just sit and take it, then it would make her madder, because how dare I get mad at her for hitting me? You're not allowed to be mad at me. It's your fault I hit you. And the way, and then maybe 2, 3 days later, she'd be back to personality A. And I go, all right, well, she's had a rough life. A lot of things happened in her first relationship. A lot of things happened in her childhood. She's struggling. Like, she can change. We'll make this a stable environment and I can make things better for her, which obviously was just me trying to fool myself. She was never going to change. But then it became, anytime there was any pushback from my end, it was threats and ultimatums. It was, well, I'm going to divorce you and take you for everything. Or like one time she put a cigarette out of my hand, and when I got mad at her verbally, she said, if you don't stop yelling at me, I'm going to call the cops and tell them you hit me. They always believe the woman. So I didn't leave the relationship, A, because I thought I could fix it, and B, because I was frankly unaware of how the court system worked, and I had no reason not to believe that her threats could be true.
so you I mean, it's terrible to even think that something like that happened, but you alluded to the fact that you were a punching bag and she put out a cigarette in your hand. But like the relationship dissolved over an incident where she effectively, like, quite violently assaulted you. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it was, it would have been October 30th of 21. And I was home with her older daughter from the first relationship, who was about 8 at the time, and our girls, who were about 2 at the time, were with my parents, which is kind of the plan we had. Every once in a while, my parents would want to take the girls just for a weekend so they were familiar with grandma and grandpa, that sort of thing. So they happened not to be there. I kind of had a one-on-one day with the older daughter, who I had been raising for 4 years at that point. And we kind of went through our day. Justine was working, gets done around 6 o'clock. I had sent her a text message that the older daughter had lost one of her teeth and probably one of the last ones. So we had to be the tooth fairy that night. She phoned me and then said, okay, well, it's this friend of mine's birthday. We're going to go out for a drink and an appetizer, but I won't be late. And then it was full silent treatment. And that was one of Justine's favorite things. It's just, will not respond. I'll talk to you when I'm ready. Like, complete radio silence. If she was partying, I'll talk to you when I'm done. There's no communication here. So throughout the night, I'd send her a couple of text messages, kind of, when are you coming home? What's going on? Like, and at this point too, the daughter, whose name I don't want to say,
It's fine.
was kind of questioning it too, like, why isn't mom home yet? And was old enough to kind of understand that maybe it's not an actual tooth fairy coming to leave a doll or whatever under my pillow. But
Mhm.
why isn't mom home yet? Like, I can't get a hold of her. And she had her little like iPad thing that they could FaceTime on. And so she was getting the silent treatment too. Nobody could get a hold of her. The 8-year-old's getting upset, kind of, when's mommy coming home? So about 11:30 that night, the daughter finally phoned the friend that Justine was partying with from our house line, and she answered. And then Justine was furious that anyone had been able to get a hold of her and ruined the night in the bar. So she drove home drunk with the friend. When they came in the door, I kind of confronted her as, what happened? Like, you went full silent treatment. Why was sitting and playing VLTs and getting drunk more important than coming home to be the tooth fairy for your daughter? So she started, now she's heard something that she didn't want to hear. So she starts throwing punches. I grabbed her arms to restrain her so I didn't get punched in the face anymore. So the friend starts punching me in the face. I let go of Justine, who goes around the corner into the kitchen, grabs a metal broom and starts swinging it at me like a baseball bat. And at that point, I just kind of tried to get away and went and locked myself in the bedroom and phoned 911. While I was locked in the bedroom, she was taking potted plants off of shelves, throwing them at the door. And then eventually the cops showed up, and at the end of the day, Justine accepted a peace bond for assault with a weapon. But it was a long process to get to that point.
So you, I guess you didn't press charges, but you called the police.
Yeah.
So the Crown pressed charges against Justine, and so she. I mean, you showed me the pictures, and I'll throw them up on the podcast if it's okay with you. But
yeah, feel free to put any of that on there.
Like, it was not a small assault. Like, you're bleeding from your neck and face and back from being hit with this broom.
Yeah.
And
no, roles reversed, I would have went to jail that night, but she was allowed to stay and sleep at our house, and basically no harm, no foul. She's a girl.
But I think roles reversed, you would also be in jail for a considerable amount of time versus like accepting a peace bond it's not an admission of guilt first and foremost, and it doesn't lead to a criminal record.
No, roles reversed. I don't believe a peace bond would have even been offered to me.
No, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I would tend to agree with you. Okay, so like now you're dealing. So she's now made allegations against you.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with criminal charges. So she's dragging you into the criminal court system based on these allegations. And like I read an article not so long ago. It says narcissistic females use false allegations for power over men who cannot be controlled. And I think we're starting to see more and more of it. And I'm, certainly I can relate to what you're going through. I've dealt with false allegations in both family court and criminal court in the past. But can you tell me a little bit about kind of where you're at with that?
Yeah, and it's actually, I don't know, funny is not the right word, but funny to the extent of, after everything kind of happened and the ball got rolling, I was put in touch with a domestic violence counselor. And then obviously, because we have children together, family services was involved. And for some reason, what they say, even though they're kind of the experts and it's what they deal with every day, none of it's admissible in court. They can't speak in court. They can't be called as witnesses without a subpoena. And basically the domestic violence counselor and the family services lady were able to map out, saw right through her instantly, and were able to map out what was going to happen. And they said, all right, when people like Justine have gotten away with being abusive for so long because she was violent for so long and I never reported it, now she's been caught. She's going to feel backed into a corner. She's going to try and flip it around and make it seem like you were the aggressor. So expect to be charged, and it's probably going to be 4 or 5 things, because what they do is throw as much as they can at the wall and hope something sticks. Fast forward about 2 months and it was 7 things. Like, they nailed it. They explained exactly to me what was going to happen, to the extent where when the police officer phoned me, he said, can you come down to the station? I have some paperwork. And I said, is the paperwork for Justine's charges or for the retaliatory charges? And he said, well, what do you mean? And then I said, what I just said now. They told me that she's going to make up charges. There's going to be 4 or 5 of them, and it's going to be to deflect blame away from herself. And the RCMP officer said, yes, it's that one. So everybody in the system seems to know what's going on and why it's going on, but nobody is able to do anything about it. So I went, and those charges are actually just about to go to trial. We're recording this on the 19th of February. The trial begins on the 27th. So we're just around the corner from it. But in the meantime, she has made a lot of the same allegations through family court, as she did to the RCMP, as she did on the EPO, which I had filed right after the incident. So there's actually
protective order.
What's that? Sorry,
EPO is emergency protection order.
Yes, yeah. Right after the broomstick thing happened, the RCMP suggested I go get a EPO because Justine refused to. For the first 2 days after the incident, she would come back to the house and harass me with her family and trying to provoke an incident. So when I finally spoke to the police before they pressed charges, I asked how I could stop that from happening, and they said, go get an emergency protection order and she won't be able to show up here anymore. So there was a hearing for that when she told a version of the story. Then there was another version of the story to the RCMP, another one in family court, another one when she was being questioned for family court, another one at the trial, and then some witness statements. But basically I have 7 or 8 different versions of events. You can actually kind of watch her work it out like a rough draft until she got the story to where she wanted it. But there's about 8 different versions that are all sworn to be true. None of them match because none of them actually happened. But it's all on record as, I swear this is true, except, oh, I'm going to change this because it sounds worse. And then I'm going to change this because it sounds worse. Now this is true.
So you mentioned they all, like, people in the system all knew that it was happening. And sorry, the advice about the counter charges, that came from Child Protective Services? Like, this is
it came from the domestic violence counselor.
Okay.
And then Child Protective Services didn't tell me what was going to happen, but they did tell me kind of off the record. They won't put it in writing, but when I spoke to the lady on the phone, they basically said, when we run your name, Scott, nothing shows up. When we run Justine's name, there's a list as long as my arm. She's been involved in this before. We have her on record as being the primary aggressor in domestic violence situations with multiple partners. When we spoke to her, all she did was deflect and change the topic. She wouldn't answer questions. She tried to turn it all around and make herself the victim. Mm-hmm. And if they see it for what it is, I don't know why they can't go on the stand and give that testimony.
Well, I think, it's interesting because when you look at the kind of sequence of events that happens after any allegation is made, especially a false allegation. So the first thing that happens is there's a false allegation, which engages the police and gives them something to do. Then the second thing that happens is it engages the Crown prosecutor. And then the Crown prosecutor has something to do. And then it engages, victim impact or child protective services or something like that, and that gives them something to do. And then that gives you a reason to build a court, and it gives you a reason to employ a judge and a clerk and
Yeah.
all the court staff and all that stuff. And then it gives the media something to report on if you're unfortunate enough to get stuck in the media. And
No,
like,
the system feeds itself.
well, that's what I was saying. Like you said, no one can help. It's like, is it in their best interest to help is the question, because if you solve the problem, then all those people lose their jobs.
Yeah, well, and that's actually been something that I want to bring up when I do meet with this Crown prosecutor is, I don't know about where you are, but in Alberta, it's been in the news for the better part of the last 2 years that the Crown prosecutor's office is underfunded and can't find prosecutors and doesn't have enough resources. Well, maybe the problem isn't enough resources. Maybe the problem is you're wasting the resources you do have and everyone's time and money on things like this, that if you spent 5 minutes, sat down and looked at it, you know that it's a waste of your time.
Do you think the Crown prosecutor is terrified to dismiss it because, because your ex would get loud and say, well, these charges are true, but the Crown just dismissed it, and the Crown doesn't want that backlash?
I don't know that I can speak to that. I haven't had any involvement with anything that I said there would be completely speculation.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so thanks for sharing that. How's your relationship with your girls now? You have twins, right?
Twin girls, yeah.
Yeah. How old are they?
3, about 3.5.
Okay. So you're just past the point where you continue to say like they're 24 months or they're 26 months. Like you're now like at the 3.5. You're gauging.
Yeah. Yeah, basically I mean they're 3, but it's a significant enough difference over 6 months between 3 and 4 that I don't know. Maybe that's just been drilled into me so long from childhood that they're 3.5, they're 4.5 up until a certain point that's just how you talk. But yeah, they will be for this upcoming September, and they're great. They're the only, I guess, silver lining about when our marriage broke down is those girls, A, weren't really present for any of what led to that, and B, will not remember a time when we were together. Like they're not going to remember mom and dad living in the same house, being a couple. I think it would have been far harder on them if the exact same events took place, but they were 10 or 12.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you still have a relationship with your ex's kids from the previous relationship?
No.
Okay.
No, there was no way for that to really happen, I don't believe.
Fair enough. Have you, like, this is all still fairly fresh. Like, have you thought about recoupling? Are you in the dating scene? Are you jaded about that process, or where are you at?
I don't know if I would say, maybe jaded is the right word, but a lot more selective, very careful about it. Like, and I guess in my situation, it's a little easier because at the time of this being recorded, it is a week on, week off custody. So I have 1 week where the girls aren't here, and I can kind of focus more on a personal life. But I'm super protective of if anybody gets to meet them or be around them, or if it becomes a more serious relationship.
That's fair. Do you think there is kind of a timeline involved, or you'll feel it out, and if and when you decide to recouple?
Yeah, and honestly, over the last 1.5 years, my focus has been almost entirely on court. There was a custody battle. We're still going through family court on, like, the divorce isn't finalized because Justine refuses to finalize it because that's the only hook she has left to dig in. It's not possible to yell at me every time I walk through the door. It's not possible to throw punches whenever you feel like it. But financial abuse is the last little bit of control she has. So I've been trying since last July to get her to sit down. I offered to pay for the full mediation. Let's just get this finished, finalized so we can both move on. And she won't, because she would have to move on. So my focus over the last year and a half has been so kind of tunnel vision towards my legal situation, whether it be family or criminal court, that I haven't put a lot of effort into a personal life.
That's fair. Do you like have you found that like your family and friends have been kind of supportive of you through this process?
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky there. I do have a very good support system. Like I said, my parents and I have a good relationship. They've actually both retired and moved to Red Deer here so they can be childcare when I have the girls and I'm at work. Like, they more or less uprooted their entire lives to make my situation as easy as possible, which I can't ever repay them for, but it's more than I could ever ask.
And you said you have two brothers, is that right?
I do.
Whereabouts are they?
They're in the area. The middle brother, I'm the oldest. The middle one lives in Edmonton, which is about an hour and a half away. The youngest one lives just about 20 minutes outside of Red Deer, where I'm at.
Nice. But
so, and they both have a good relationship with the girls. They're
good. What do you like? What are your plans for the future? I mean, do you like what's your plan for the girls for the future?
That, I don't know. That's a very tough question to answer, because as of right now, it is a full 50-50 split with joint decision making. And at 3 years old, that's not an issue. But as it gets to be school ages and that, I know that there's not even a small part of Justine that is going to think about what is actually best for the girls. It's going to be about, how do I make this about me? And if I say one thing, she will say the opposite just to have something to argue about. So honestly, I don't see any situation where I can avoid taking this back to court over the next year or two.
Or 15.
Or 15
and
fight. Yeah. But no, I need, and I think that, I guess one nice thing that I do have is, in our current court order, we're only allowed conversation over a parenting app, and all of that is admissible in court. So I think there's enough, or will be enough, when it's time to go, that you can pretty clearly see who's trying and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I can, until that happens, I don't know I can really even make a plan, because my plan is only as good as her approval.
Would you think about kind of seeking sole custody once all this criminal stuff is out of the way?
I would like to. I think it would be better for them, but that's a hard step. I think what I can do, which is probably more realistic, is I don't see a lot of change in the custody, but I think I can make a very good case for sole decision making when it comes to things like education, medical issues, basically any situation that involves a parent, because frankly, I am one and she isn't.
Any situation that involves a logical decision to be made.
Yeah, more or less.
Anything else you want to share, I guess, and like what would you want people to kind of take away from what you've gone through?
Um, geez, I don't know that. I mean, every situation's so different, but I wish when it first started with me, I would just like there to be more resources for men going through this than there are. Like I had to search pretty long and hard to find anything that wasn't, you say domestic violence and basically it's, well, that only happens to women. You say I need support and they say, well, that we have all sorts of programs for women, nothing for men. So I would like the takeaway to be that it is a two-way street and that you don't have to do what I did and make excuses and think she'll change and be afraid. I want more people to be able to take out of it that you have to kind of stand your ground and it's not okay for them to attack you just as it wouldn't be for you to attack them. It needs to stop where it stops and it doesn't matter which gender is the aggressor.
Mm-hmm. That was amazing, man. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm glad you've come as far as you have come, and I wish you the best of luck in court next week. I'm confident that it'll go well, and I wish you the best for the future, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Good to talk to you.